I filled up this tarp with all the seeds. I've been deadheading the beds at a property I'm taking care of. These have already all popped on me and spilled on the ground. But you can see there's a lot of stacks, and all those have a lot of seeds on them. Every plant that you run into is like this. They're so profuse, and people don't realize it because seeds are so expensive usually, and so hoarded, and so there's this feeling of scarcity. But you see each one of those, it's a totally viable hollyhock seed. About 60 of them in each little thing. Look how many's on a stack. So you can take those and you can save them up, and you can try and put them out at the right time of the year. The easiest way to do it is to copy nature. That's always going to be the easiest. So instead of trying to save them, protect them, put them out at the right moment, which changes year for year. Seeds will lay latent, remember, and not even come up until it's their perfect conditions. So even though it looks to you, you're like, sun, water, it's the right spring time for spreading seeds or whatever, half the time it's not, and they would have naturally sat there, and so they don't bloom for you or sprout for you, and people get discouraged. What I've found from watching nature is that it works on abundance. So if you take all these seeds and you throw them out over an area, the spots where they survive and where they pick to grow will be where they're naturally going to grow at the dates when they're naturally going to sprout, on the seasons and the years when they naturally would, remembering that seeds can last for 10, 15, 20 years. My viewers always remind me that there's seeds that they've found in the Egyptian tombs that are still viable, so they can sit there for thousands of years. The point being, there's life in a seed that sits there and waits until the conditions are right. For you to try and guess, that's really hard. For you to keep remembering to store them all, that's really hard. So I will just cut plants where I have wild space that I'm trying to fill in with flowers. I'll just cut them, bring them to an area devoid of life, or that's sparse, or where I want them to spread. And you can see that's what I've done here. Here's their bodies, and I've just spread them along the ground. Now this is kind of the before on this too, so later on I'll be showing you a video of this slope. This is a barren slope. There was pine trees here, they burnt down in a fire, we cut them down. There is just bare dirt, but what I found is wildflowers like to grow in the spots where bushes and other things aren't. So flat areas and tilled areas and perfectly cultivated areas, you'll hardly ever get them to sprout, especially if there's a lot of competition in, and there will be competition because they're the desirable flat tilled good areas where a bunch of other plants rush in. When there's fires and the bushes are burnt away, and there's bare rock and the grasses are burnt away, or places where there's roadside edges and it's sparse because of erosion and no soil builds up, so a lot of other plants can't hang on, that's where wildflowers and a lot of flowers like to thrive. So that's part of what happened in California, is we had Spanish grasses that came in with all of the different pioneers and took over. So what was really kind of sparse, small, thin grasses and wildflowers covering the state within 100 years had turned into thick grains, and wildflowers have a hard time fighting up through it, not to mention it became more and more of a fire hazard, especially as the trees were dropped down for ranching and lumber and everything else. So back to the flowers, if it had been left with its sparse grass, we would still have the wildflowers that you see, which are in the last preserves in California. And if you go to those wildflower preserves and you look at them, you'll notice that they're rocky, very thin soil areas, and that's where wildflowers thrive, which brings us back to copying nature. They do not wait and save it. They get crushed over, their green veg turns dry, they get massacred by wind. Everything, you know, they turn gray, they fold over, the wind breaks them over, their seeds drop, they lay in the soil, a bunch of things come and eat them, gather them. Some things are destroyed by the sun, by, you know, just different factors, but some of them, and that's how nature works, make their way through. So here we probably have represented what I've thrown down. I'm not joking. If you look, these are scabiosa. Each one of these is a seed head. And each one of those little pieces on there is a seed. So when I'm going to tell you I threw down 100,000 seeds right now, I'm not joking. There's 100,000 seeds on this slope. Now, I'm gonna beat those with a rake, the back of my rake. I'm gonna leave them. That's just kind of what I do until the next visit. And then I'll rake up all their big bodies for aesthetics. I'm not gonna leave that there. But all that I've done then is cut it off, throw it on a tarp, and throw it somewhere else where I want it. Ignore it, let it get mashed in, rake up the big stuff. Those seeds have rained down. Now you have a completely seeded slope with 100,000 different wildflower seeds. And if you got 20 out of each of those varieties, they're volunteered, they're strong, they're in a place where they wanted to grow in the season where they decided to start. You can't get a better plant than a volunteer in its location where it got sensed all of the right conditions and said, this will be good for me. So if you got 20 of each of these type of plants, there's like 7 here, your slope would be covered in them. And those are mother plants, pioneer plants that are going to forever shed seeds in their cycles. And you can take a bare slope and cover it up. When it's got veg on it, vegetation, it's going to hold moisture even better. So it's going to not be self-watering, but you can make an environment that was so rocky and barren that it was just losing moisture, couldn't hold a drop. You can make it a little more spongy, so it holds a little bit of the morning dew, and when it does get your rare watering, it holds that better, and it will be stacking up forever now. And that's the power of a seed. That's why you need seeds. Okay, that was a little short on what to do in August and harvest time, or the done blooming time of the year wherever you are in the world. Take your seeds. I always tell people this too. People give you beautiful bouquets half the time they have seeds in them. Throw those out in spots, and you know what? You get complete failure here. Then your experiment failed. There was non-exposure, or it wasn't the correct exposure, the correct conditions, but you didn't lose anything, you know. You keep throwing them out in different spots, and that's what I've done everywhere, and you have great success. You have the success of nature. You have a failure rate of hundreds of thousands. So if you compare that to packets of seeds, that's crazy. At $1.49 a pop, 20 seeds in there. That's why I can get crazy. You're buying 4 little starts and trying to put them in. Do you know how hard that is in nature? You're hoping that where you choose and your amount of water and the things it finds in the soil and what you give it are all going to work out. You throw a seed out and let it decide to grow for you, and all you really have to do is help it along. And that's how nature works. Like I said, a failure rate of hundreds of thousands for the 40 that survive. You roll like that and you're going to be successful, and you're going to be able to, I like to compare it to, you can't stop a wave, you can't stop time, you can't stop nature. You can aim things, you can surf things, and you can ride things. So you pay attention to the patterns, you watch what's easiest and best, and you go with it, man. Last part of that, because these can lay latent, and each of these type of seeds has different lengths at which it can lay latent, meaning not sprouting, in your seed library. You consider your soil here, and every seed that's in it, whether it's a weed seed, meaning undesirable, or a desirable, an ornamental flower or a plant which you do want, they're all in there. That's what's important to remember, is that they don't go away year after year. They're all in there, and they all have different shelf lives of how long they can last in the soil. You'll spread seeds out and they won't go for you, even the ones you buy from a store. 2 years later they can pop up for you because it's the right conditions. So you've saved your seeds. They're in the ground, and your library is thickening. You could come by here the next year and the next year and add into it, and all that you're doing is adding to a library. So keep that in mind too. Things don't always show up for you at first. A lot of wildflowers don't pop the first year. That's their weird secret. And the next year after you've given up, you're like, oh, there they are. I put those seeds in. Very common.